Mm, eek. Mm. Live long and prosper. Today's episode, the Corbomite maneuver. So the Corbomite maneuver is actually the third Star Trek episode to be recorded. They did not air in order. A lot of fans already know that. And so after the first two pilots, after the Cage and Where No Man Has Gone Before, the very next one would have been the Corbomite maneuver. As it aired, we ended up getting the Man Trap. One of the things this does, and throwing this out of order, is that in the Corbomite maneuver, we get the first appearance of Lieutenant Uhura, we get the first appearance of Dr. McCoy, and the first appearance of Yeoman Janice Rand. Knowing that gives more insight into the episode and the people, the interaction of the characters, whereas we've already seen them in the Man Trap when it aired, and so it's really kind of out of order. Yeoman Rand delivers Captain Kirk's food. She leaves. He says to Dr. McCoy, I get a hold of the guy at command that assigned me a female yeoman. And McCoy says, what's the matter, Jim? Don't you trust yourself? It's clearly the first time we've seen Yeoman Rand, and we're getting it the very first look at McCoy and Kirk in that formula they have together with one another. Not really so much McCoy interacting with Spock in this one, but how each of them interact with Kirk. There's a little bit of holdover of the very early culture. That's to say, there's a more military feel on the ship. Mr. Spock, though unemotional and only logical, is barking out orders, report all stations, and things of that nature. We get the story of Bailey, the guy who Jim Kirk promoted too quickly because he saw something of himself in him, which is one of the first indications that were given when this was filmed, about Jim Kirk being a bit of a prodigy as a younger officer, as someone that rose through the ranks very quickly. It's a part of his character that we haven't heard about ourselves yet, and we hear about it sort of as it's applied to Bailey. Of course, the real famous thing about the episode is the Starship Viserys, the big, giant, glowing ball with the little balls on it that is overwhelmingly large. Clint Howard as Baylock, and of course, his little drink called Tranya. What really makes the episode worthwhile is that it is so early on in the series, and it is showing us not just the beginning of this character development of the three, the Kirk McCoy Spock trichotomy, but we're getting a better sense already of who Starfleet is. They don't mention the Federation. They mention, I believe it's a United Space Force or Earth Force. There's some reference which is made, hair problems. It's not real well defined, and yet it's in this episode that Kirk makes a point of being nonviolent, of not reacting aggressively, of reacting first and foremost with peace. He allows his ship to be irradiated dangerously, and he doesn't fire. We might actually say that compared to the rest of the series and what comes in the future, it's much more of a Picard thing to do in some fashion. But Jim Kirk is not taking aggressive action until it is absolutely necessary. But we get the idea he had sort of a sense of it's a test, not that it wasn't real, but that what they do out there is going to determine what the other species think of them, and that it's ultimately better to put their lives all at risk than to give off the wrong impression of humanity going out there. And so he waits. He puts off taking action till he absolutely has to. And then when he does escape, and of course, if you've seen the episode, there's the distress signal, and it turns out to all be a setup. But they don't know that it's a setup for a proper test. Rather, they believe that whoever is in the alien ship is in jeopardy, their life support family, and they're not going to get help. The people that just attack them, threaten their lives, put them at risk, who have that giant ship that just left, this overwhelming power, which unusual for science fiction, particularly of the time, giving the idea that we would be so overwhelmingly outclassed, and the answer isn't in a secret technology or a secret strategy or bacteria, or it's not really a war at all, that these folks are much more developed, advanced than the species that we are. And being willing, as Kirk says in the episode, an opportunity to live out, I don't remember the exact quote, an opportunity to show that our high-minded words mean something, that all of the talk about seeking out new life and new civilizations and peace and in harmony and seeking understanding, it makes it impossible to just leave and assume that the alien will die. You want to go help him. And it's a great, we would say it's one of the great classic Star Trek moments. The bad guy alien now needs our help. We're going to help him. We see this later, but again, this is episode 3. This is recorded to be only the second episode with Captain Kirk. And so it's very early in the franchise, we would say, and yet these very critical, important ideas are being put out there. So that's the Corbomite maneuver. Watch it, enjoy it, love it. Peace and long life.